Some killers take great lengths to be caught, and the FBI has had its fair share of these cases. First up is Giovanni Borjas, who eluded the police for 2 weeks after 2 bodies were found in California. 17-year-old Michelle Lozano and 22-year-old Brianna Guzman's bodies were found dumped in dumpsters or on the side of the road. Both had been sexually assaulted and beaten. The mystery of the murder led the authorities to request familial DNA, which tests DNA on crime scenes against any possible family member DNA in the database.
Now, familial DNA can only be used with the approval of the State Attorney General's office. That's how rare it is.
After approval, the test results were a match for the father of Giovanni Borjas. Borjas strangely had no criminal record other than taking some parking tickets, proving that even the most innocent can be a hidden monster. Police followed Borjas for 2 weeks, searching for any way to get his DNA, until his filthy habit of spitting on the side of the road landed him in court for murder. Borjas wouldn't plead guilty, despite being scientifically red-handed. In court, Guzman's father was on the brink of tears, tugging on the heartstrings of everyone.
I have to thank the LAPD, all the efforts they did to catch this monster, get him off the street.
While Borjas remained silent until he changed his plea to no contest. After a failed attempt to get him the death penalty, Borjas was sentenced to life without parole for 2 counts of forcible rape, 2 counts of first-degree murder, and 1 count of kidnapping. While Borjas had the cops on his tail for weeks, John Calitz was far more direct in his confrontation. In Hernando County, Florida, a warm family home would witness absolute horror when John Calitz would suddenly open fire inside his sister's home, where she, her office manager, his pregnant niece, and 1 more were present. John's sister, Catherine Donovan, and her office manager, Deborah Tillotson, were shot and killed, while his niece and 1 more guest were shot but survived. The attack was so horrific that one of them called the cops, pleading for help in the midst of the horror.
Oh my God, I'm shot in the stomach and the shoulder. Help, please!
After John Calitz was finished, he would make things far worse when he went up north to Cross City and got into another shootout with the police this time, where he shot and killed Dixie County Sheriff Captain. After his arrest, chances of mercy towards Calitz was 0, and he definitely realized this. In court, Calitz was completely emotionless, knowing what was coming. He traded his suit and long hair for a shaved head and prison jumpsuit, as the judge told him exactly what he needed to hear.
John William Calitz, you've not only forfeited your right to live among us, but under the laws of the state of Florida, you have forfeited your right to live at all.
Apparently, Calitz blamed his sister for his legal trouble and wanted to erase her bloodline. But his trouble would become far greater as he was granted the death penalty. So it's his bloodline that would be erased forever. While Calitz couldn't hide what he'd done, others, like Zachariah Anderson, try their hardest to appear innocent. In Wisconsin, Sadie Beecham would receive a creepy familiar stalker, her ex and father of her 3 children, Zachariah Anderson. After Sadie moved on and got a new boyfriend, her life would be horrifically halted when her boyfriend Rosalio Gutierrez suddenly went missing. And when Sadie went to check up on him, she would instead find a crime scene of blood all over his home. The number 1 suspect immediately became the classic trope of the jealous ex-boyfriend. But this time, Zachariah Anderson made it 100% viable when police searched his farm and found bleach bottles that were used to clean the inside of his van, pieces of clothing and carpentry, and lastly, Gutierrez's DNA inside Anderson's work van. Anderson was arrested, but then he decided to make things harder with an innocence plea, being extremely adamant that he did not commit the crime.
But I disagree. I'm innocent. I don't know what you're going to decide. I don't know what you're all going to weigh. I don't even know how to represent my own character without having my family be able to testify on my behalf. But they do have some things that are relevant.
With almost no one believing him, his own daughter testified against him, and that's where he slipped.
To this day, I wonder, did he ever love me? Or was I just a pawn, a toy, or his little golden retriever? You took me for granted, and you will never get the same respect back. If you don't believe me, ask Mom. She doesn't have that respect either anymore.
During her testimony, Anderson kept trying to shut her up, something an innocent man would never do. Despite his plea, he was charged with felony stalking, as well as murder and hiding a corpse, landing himself a life sentence. While some killers take years of twistedness to make them commit their acts, some are born in the heat of a moment, like Teddy Baltimore Smith. In Tampa, Florida, Teddy Baltimore Smith would end up stabbing 56-year-old Gilbert Cerner solely for a spit that landed on Smith's BMW after an argument between the two. Smith was immediately arrested and tried, but it's his trial that revealed his complete lack of awareness and accountability. Smith kept trying to make excuses that Cerner was somehow at fault for the horror that Smith induced upon him, complaining about every detail.
Well, he pulled up on me and he spit on me. You know what I'm saying? After I asked him please not to do that, I don't know how come he did that. Why would he do that to me? I don't even know him.
Smith also faced Cerner's family, who definitely didn't appreciate Smith's attitude.
Because of you, my family and I will never share precious moments together. Nothing you receive will ever bring him back to us. Because of you, there will always be a big part of my heart missing.
After being charged with manslaughter, Smith was recommended 25 years of prison time, but the judge decided to add an extra 3, rounding it up to 28.
No, you're giving me 28 years. At least you want to.
Of course, Smith really didn't like that, but he'd have to do his complaining in his jail cell. And while there's never any justifiable motive for murder, getting a bad grade in high school might be one of the worst. In Fairfield, Iowa, 16-year-old Willard Miller was failing his high school Spanish class with his friend Jeremy Goodale. Instead of taking the time to study harder or seek help, the pair decide to stalk their teacher, Nahima Graber, to plan a vicious attack.
Certainly a high school junior who formulates a plan, or high schooler that formulates a plan with his friend, and murders his Spanish teacher is a dangerous person to the community.
After following Graber, the two ambushed their 66-year-old teacher, dragged her to the woods, and beat her to death with a baseball bat. When her body was found wrapped in the woods, the two were arrested and tried separately. The pair admitted what they'd done, and despite Miller being 17, he would still be charged as an adult, with the judge telling him,
"And evil does not have a birthday."
Even worse, Miller seemed to have no emotion whatsoever in court. His apology speech felt like something you would write down, and not from the heart, especially with him almost smiling the whole time.
I would like to apologize for my actions. First and foremost, to the family, I'm sincerely sorry for the distress that I've caused you and the devastation I've caused your family. I would like to apologize to my family. I love you guys so much, and I'm really sorry for what I've done and how it's affected you. And I'm planning on getting back out there as soon as I can and make up for lost time.
The judge wouldn't have it and decided to give him a lesson in morality.
You and Mr. Goodell cut Nahima Graber's precious life short. That would not be justice, regardless of your age, Mr. Miller. The bedrock of our criminal justice system is deterrence and rehabilitation. And ultimately, while acknowledging your youth and developing brain, I find that your intent and actions were sinister and evil.
Ultimately, Miller was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. These killers were caught quite quickly, but Joseph Ziela managed to evade justice for 26 years. In 1990, Joseph Ziela broke into the home of Jan Cornell, where her 11-year-old daughter Robin and babysitter Lisa Story were sleeping. Ziela not only raped both, but he murdered them with suffocation. When Jan Cornell went back home, she found this grueling sight, with no killer suspected for 26 years.
He's an evil man. I don't even like to call him a man. He's evil to the core.
Justice never dies, however, and in 2016, 61-year-old Joseph Ziela was arrested for a totally different crime, but when his DNA was taken, it matched the DNA of Robin and Lisa's killer. All of a sudden, the case was wide open again, and hope was on the horizon. Joseph, however, would choose to make things more difficult, claiming that he was innocent, and that the only reason his DNA was there was because he possibly slept with Jan Cornell months before the crime. Not only did this not make sense, Joseph decided to anger the jury even more, calling Jan a pig who doesn't wash her sheets.
I mean, I was here in December '89. I testified to that earlier. And what I believe happened is I slept with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller, and they were just too much of a pig not to wash their sheets.
This was only the first of many stunts Yella would pull, including wearing veneers with the word killer, threatening Jan with letters of retribution, creepily staring at Jan during the trial, and when he was found guilty, he decided to take it out on his own attorney.
I used to box. I've taken a lot better shots than that.
After evading the police for so long, justice was served, and Joseph was given 2 death penalties for his 2 murders. Murder is horrible, no matter who the victim is, but it's even more maddening when it's a former friend. On September the 29th, 2014, Khalil Davenport and Rashawn Glaspie broke into the home of their old friend, Philip Jr. They brought along William Houston and Jamara Dooley. The break-in was meant to steal some marijuana Philip had, but everything went wrong. Davenport suddenly fled, and Dooley's gun went off, hitting Philip in the chest. Philip would later die from his injuries. All 4 men were charged with murder, conspiracy to commit assault, and assault with the intent to rob.
3, assault with intent to rob while armed, guilty. We, the jury, find the defendant Rashawn Marcellus Gillespie as follows. Count 1, homicide, felony murder, guilty. Count 2, conspiracy to commit assault with intent to rob while armed, guilty. Count 3, assault with intent to rob while armed, guilty.
But then the case got complicated once again when Davenport and Houston pleaded guilty to unarmed robbery, but the other 2 didn't. There really is no honor among thieves, because Davenport and Houston would receive a much shorter sentence. However, all men would have to face their victims' parents first, who gave gut-wrenching testimonies in court.
Because on September 25th, you was over there, laughing and giggling. I told Philip you were so grimy to keep you away from the house. I knew y'all all grew up together. Me and your mom have a 20-year friendship. He told Mom, I know how he is, but that's my friend. I hope y'all rot in hell.
As part of their plea agreement, Davenport and Houston received 10 to 15 years in prison for unarmed robbery, while Dooley and Glaspie got life sentences for their involvement.